I paid my parents' mortgage for years while my jobless brother played the victim. Now they're about to lose everything, and they expect me to fix it all over again. There are moments in life when your whole world shatters, and you realize the people you sacrificed everything for have been secretly stabbing you in the back. For 5 excruciating years, I poured my life savings into saving my family, only to discover they were funneling my money to fund my lazy brother's schemes. And now, they're about to lose it all, expecting me to be their savior again. You know, growing up on the northwest side of Chicago, in a modest brick bungalow with faded blue shutters, our home was my parents' pride and joy. Robert and Diane, my mom and dad, bought that house a year before I was born. I remember Dad meticulously mowing the lawn, Mom planting flowers. They worked so hard to give us a stable life, but money was always tight. Dad was a hardware store manager. Mom juggled part-time jobs. They never went to college, but they drilled it into me and my brother, Marcus. Education was our ticket out, our shot at the American dream they'd fought so hard for. But from the moment Marcus arrived, 3 years after me, things were different. For me, expectations were high. Chores done, respectful behavior. Marcus? He seemed to operate under a whole different set of rules. I still remember my 10th birthday, a second-hand bike Dad lovingly refurbished. 3 years later, Marcus turned 10, threw a fit in the store, and got a brand new mountain bike. Mom's explanation? Your brother is more sensitive. You were always such an easy child. That phrase became the soundtrack to my childhood. Marcus got what he wanted with emotional outbursts. I learned to suppress my own desires, to be the good son. By high school, our paths were already diverging. I was in computer club, a 4.0 GPA, working weekends bagging groceries. Marcus? Bouncing between friend groups, barely passing, glued to video games. My achievements were expected. His bare minimum was celebrated. College just amplified it. I got a partial scholarship to the University of Illinois for computer science, but I still worked 20 hours a week, took summer internships, and graduated with $15,000 in loans, but also with honors and job offers. Marcus, meanwhile, half-heartedly enrolled in community college, lasted 1 semester, and dropped out. My parents always had excuses. He's finding himself. Not everyone is academic like you. Or my personal favorite, Marcus is creative. He doesn't fit into traditional education. What they called creative, I called lazy. While I was pulling all-nighters, Marcus was up until dawn playing online games, sleeping until mid-afternoon. Every break, I'd come home to find him exactly where I'd left him, on the couch, controller in hand, surrounded by empty energy drink cans. Despite the growing resentment, I still wanted to make my parents proud. After graduation, I landed a job at a tech startup. The salary wasn't huge by industry standards, but it felt like a fortune to me. I got a small 1-bedroom apartment, far enough from home for independence, but close enough for Sunday dinners. Those first few years were liberating. I was paying off loans, building savings. But every Sunday, the scene at my parents' house was the same. Marcus, living rent-free, no job, no plans. He'd talk about business ideas or online ventures, but nothing ever materialized. And I started noticing things, bills piling up, the fridge making worrying noises, water stains spreading across the ceiling. Then came the first request. 7 months into my new job, Mom called, uncharacteristically timid. Could I loan them $800 for the electric bill? Just until Dad gets his bonus, she promised. I transferred the money immediately. When I asked about Marcus contributing, Mom quickly changed the subject. That $800 was never repaid. It marked the beginning of a pattern I didn't recognize then. Every few months, another emergency. Car repairs, property taxes, insurance. Marcus, meanwhile, cycled through minimum wage jobs, always with a dramatic story about toxic workplaces or unreasonable managers. I tried to talk to my parents. Why doesn't Marcus have to contribute? My question was always met with the same lines. He's struggling with his confidence. He'll figure things out in his own time. Not everyone finds their path as easily as you. Each conversation left me feeling guilty for my own success and furious at the unfairness. But I kept writing checks, telling myself it was temporary. that things would change. I was wrong. Everything changed dramatically 3 years after graduation. It was a Tuesday evening in October when Mom called, her voice shaking so badly I could barely understand her. Dad had collapsed at work. I left my office immediately, jumped in a taxi, and rushed to Northwestern Memorial Hospital. The waiting room lights cast a sickly glow over Mom's face as she paced, clutching her purse. Marcus sat slumped in a chair, headphones on, utterly disconnected. Mom practically collapsed into my arms, sobbing about Dad working too hard, worrying too much about bills. After 4 agonizing hours, a doctor confirmed it, a moderate heart attack. He would survive, but needed surgery and significant lifestyle changes. Seeing Dad, usually so robust, looking so small in that hospital bed, tubes and wires connecting him to beeping machines, broke my heart. "I'm sorry to worry you kids," he whispered. "I'll be back on my feet in no time." But he wouldn't be. 2 months off work, then reduced hours for much longer. His insurance was mediocre, the sick leave minimal. The financial implications hit me like a ton of bricks. Meanwhile, Marcus managed to make it about himself. In the cafeteria, while I was discussing Dad's medication with Mom, Marcus had what he called a panic attack, hyperventilating, claiming he couldn't handle the stress. A nurse brought him water in a paper bag, while Mom comforted him, and I kept taking notes. The day before Dad was discharged, I met the financial counselor. The numbers were staggering. Over $20,000 after insurance for the hospital stay alone, not including follow-up care. The counselor gave me a sympathetic look and a brochure for medical bankruptcy. That evening, I insisted on seeing my parents' financial situation. Mom reluctantly pulled out a shoebox full of bills. What I saw shocked me to my core. They'd refinanced the house twice. Already, they were 3 months behind on the mortgage. Credit card debt had ballooned to nearly $30,000, mostly for everyday expenses. I sat at that kitchen table, where I'd done homework, celebrated birthdays, and felt like I couldn't breathe. While I was building my career, dreaming of my own future, my parents had been drowning. That night, back at my apartment, I had a difficult conversation with my girlfriend, Jessica. She was compassionate, but concerned. "It's not your responsibility to fix their financial problems," she said. "You have your own life to build." "They're my parents," I replied. "They sacrificed for me. How can I not help?" "There's a difference between helping and enabling," Jessica warned, a statement that would prove prophetic. "And what about Marcus? Why is this falling entirely on you?" I didn't have a good answer for her. Instead, I scheduled meetings with their mortgage lender and a financial advisor. The lender was willing to work with them, but warned that further delinquency meant foreclosure. The financial advisor painted an even grimmer picture. Insolvent, no retirement savings, a house underwater. After sleepless nights and long talks with Jessica, I made a decision that would alter my life. I'd pay their $2,000 monthly mortgage directly, clear the medical bills, and set up a budget. My parents met my plan with tearful gratitude. "Just until Dad's back on his feet," Mom promised. "We'll pay you back every penny." Marcus, when told, merely shrugged. "That's cool of you, bro," he said, returning to his video game. What was supposed to be temporary quickly became permanent. Dad went back to work, but only part-time, his income halved. Mom picked up extra shifts, but it wasn't enough. I was transferring $2,000 monthly, plus varying amounts for utilities, taxes, insurance, and unexpected expenses like a failed water heater or new tires. The financial strain on me was immense. I postponed buying my own condo, cut retirement contributions, rarely took vacations. I worked overtime, took on freelance coding projects, tracked every dollar. Jessica and I stopped going out, opting for home-cooked meals and walks by Lake Michigan. Marcus, predictably, continued his pattern. He'd get a job, retail, food delivery, warehouse, but never kept one longer than a few months. Always excuses. The schedule was unfair. The manager had it out for me. My mental health was suffering. After each job loss, he'd recover for weeks or months. When I suggested he contribute, even a token amount, my parents shut it down. "He's trying his best," Mom insisted. "Not everyone has your abilities," Dad added. The subtext was clear. Marcus needed protection, understanding. I was the strong, responsible one, expected to handle any burden. As months turned into years, my emergency intervention became my new normal. Every month, the mortgage. Every few months, an urgent extra expense. My own dreams, homeownership, travel, a family, receded further with each passing year. As my support became entrenched, my career still progressed. 2 years into paying their mortgage, I got a promotion, a 20% salary increase. Instead of improving my own life, most of that income went to covering more of my parents' expenses as inflation hit their bills. The added workload and constant financial pressure began taking a toll on my relationship with Jessica. What started as disagreements about my financial priorities grew into recurring arguments. "You're setting yourself on fire to keep your family warm," she said during one heated discussion, "and they're not even trying to find their own matches. What am I supposed to do?" I shot back. "Let them lose their house. Let Dad skip his medication. Your brother could get a real job," she countered. "Your parents could downsize. There are options that don't involve you sacrificing your entire future." These arguments became more frequent until, 3 years into my financial arrangement, Jessica and I broke up. The strain of my family obligations was the primary catalyst. The night she moved her things out, I sat alone in my apartment, staring at half-empty shelves, wondering if I'd made the right choices. With my relationship over, I threw myself even more into work and supporting my parents. I moved to a smaller, cheaper apartment, extending my commute just to save $300 a month. I cut back further on personal spending, basic meals, no new clothes or electronics. The constant stress started affecting my health. Insomnia became my nightly companion. I'd lie awake until 3 a.m., worrying. Anxiety attacks before family dinners, knowing I'd see evidence of their continued mismanagement. I gained weight from stress eating. Meanwhile, Marcus's behavior grew increasingly manipulative. He developed an uncanny ability to claim depression or anxiety whenever jobs or contributions came up. "You have no idea what it's like," he'd say, never seeking professional help. "Not everyone can just power through like you." He started cycling through business ventures that required startup capital, which my parents inevitably funded with my money. The 2-month dropshipping scheme. The gaming podcast. That lasted 3 episodes. The custom t-shirt plan that never got past a logo. The photography business that amounted to a $5,000 camera bought on my parents' credit card, gathering dust. After a week, I discovered these not through transparency, but through passing comments or seeing new equipment around the house. When I questioned these expenses, my parents became defensive. "We're just trying to support his entrepreneurial spirit. He needs to find his passion." Marcus became adept at using my parents as emotional pawns. If I expressed frustration, he'd tell them I thought they were bad parents, or that I resented helping them. This would lead to tearful calls from Mom, asking if I was ashamed of them. The incident with the car perfectly exemplified the dysfunction. My parents' aging Honda needed regular maintenance, often postponed. When Marcus needed to drive to a job interview for a position he'd later claim was beneath him, he took the car despite Mom's reminder that the brakes were making concerning noises. He rear-ended another vehicle, thousands in damage. Since my parents had liability-only insurance to save money, the repair costs fell entirely on them, which, of course, meant me. When I learned about it that weekend, I asked Marcus directly why. He'd taken a car with known brake issues. How was I supposed to know the brakes would fail? He shrugged. "Besides, if you'd helped them maintain the car properly, this wouldn't have happened." Somehow, in his narrative, the accident became my fault for not giving my parents enough money for car maintenance, rather than his for driving an unsafe vehicle. When I pointed this out, he stormed off. My parents chided me for being too hard on him when he was already feeling guilty. The tension reached its breaking point at Thanksgiving that year, the 4th year of my financial support. I'd been working 60-hour weeks, fighting a persistent cold, exhausted but determined to enjoy the holiday. The table was festive, Mom's traditional turkey, her best dishes. Dishes I'd recently paid to replace after the dishwasher flooded the kitchen. Marcus emerged from his room around 2 p.m., just as we were about to eat, offering no help. Dinner started. Pleasantly enough, but then Dad mentioned property taxes had increased. They might need a little extra help next month. Something in me just snapped. What about Marcus? I asked, setting down my fork. He lives here rent-free. Why can't he help with the property taxes? An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. Marcus glared at me, shoving mashed potatoes into his mouth. Your brother is between opportunities right now, Mom said carefully. He's been between opportunities for nearly a decade. I replied, unable to keep the bitterness out of my voice. I'm paying your mortgage, your medical bills, your car, insurance, and now property taxes, while he contributes nothing. Not everyone can be perfect. Like you, Nathan. Marcus spat. Some of us have real struggles. Real struggles. I laughed. A humorless sound. You've never paid a bill in your life. You've never had to choose between fixing your car and paying rent. You've never had to cancel a vacation because your family needed money. That's enough. Dad interjected, his face flushed. Your brother is trying his best. His best. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly. His best is sleeping until noon and playing video games all day. His best is starting businesses that fail within weeks because he has no work ethic. Meanwhile, I've put my entire life on hold for 4 years to keep this family afloat. We never asked you to put your life on hold. Mom said tearfully. You ask for money every month. I was nearly shouting now. What did you think that cost me? Do you think $2,000 a month grows on trees? Do you have any idea what I've sacrificed? The room fell silent again, except for Mom's quiet sniffling. Marcus wore a smug expression, as if he knew he'd won again. Dad looked torn between anger and shame. If you resent helping us so much, maybe you should stop, Marcus finally said. We'll manage somehow. We always have. The audacity of that statement, from the person who had never managed anything in his life, was too much. I grabbed my coat and keys, mumbled something about needing air, and left. It was the first major holiday I had ever spent without my family. I drove home in tears, equal parts furious and heartbroken. 6 months after that disastrous Thanksgiving, I met Sarah at an industry conference. I was giving a presentation, and she asked the most insightful question during the Q&A. We talked all evening, exchanged numbers, and by the end of the week, we had our first date. Sarah was different. A UX designer, she was creative but practical, passionate about her work, but able to maintain boundaries. Her family was close-knit, supportive, not draining. At first, I hesitated to share the full extent of my family situation. I mentioned I helped my parents financially, but downplayed the amounts. I talked about Marcus vaguely, saying he had trouble finding his path. I was afraid if Sarah knew the truth, that I was essentially supporting 3 adults while living in a cramped apartment with secondhand furniture, she might see me differently. But as our relationship deepened, keeping these secrets became impossible. 2 months in, Sarah suggested a weekend getaway. I had to decline, explaining an unexpected expense. When she innocently asked what happened, I fumbled through an explanation about car repairs, not wanting to admit I'd just paid $2,000 to replace my parents' air conditioning during a heat wave. Nathan, she said gently, taking my hand across the coffee shop table. I get the feeling there's something you're not telling me about your finances. Her kind, non-judgmental approach broke through my defenses. Everything poured out. The 5 years of support, the tens of thousands of dollars, my enabling of Marcus, the ruined holidays, the indefinitely postponed future plans. I expected shock, perhaps pity. Instead, Sarah listened with genuine empathy, then asked thoughtful questions about how this situation made me feel and what I wanted for my own future. It sounds like you've been carrying this alone for a long time, she said. That's a heavy burden for anyone. For the first time in years, I felt truly seen and understood. Sarah didn't offer unsolicited advice or judge. She simply acknowledged the complexity and assured me I deserved happiness, too. As our relationship grew stronger, I began to see my family dynamics through Sarah's perspective, not as normal obligations, but as an unhealthy pattern harming everyone. With her subtle encouragement, I started to imagine what setting boundaries might look like. Then came the day that changed everything. I decided to surprise my parents with brunch one Saturday morning. As I pulled into their driveway, I saw an official-looking envelope taped to the front door. My stomach dropped when I saw the word foreclosure stamped in bold red letters. Heart pounding, I used my key. My parents were at the kitchen table. Mom's eyes were red from crying. Dad stared blankly at a stack of papers. What is going on? I demanded, holding up the notice. I've been paying the mortgage every month. How is this possible? The silence that followed was deafening. Mom wouldn't meet my eyes. Dad cleared his throat several times. We've been having some additional expenses, he finally said. What expenses could possibly be more important than keeping your house? I asked, my voice rising with each word. After more uncomfortable silence and evasive answers, the horrifying truth finally emerged through tearful confessions. For the past 8 months, my parents had been using the money I sent for the mortgage to fund Marcus's latest business opportunity, a cryptocurrency investment scheme he'd convinced them would deliver huge returns. They'd diverted my mortgage payments, believing they'd catch up once Marcus's investment paid off. Instead, Marcus had lost everything, nearly $30,000 of my money, in what turned out to be a barely disguised Ponzi scheme. The mortgage was now 4 months delinquent, and the bank had run out of patience. As this reality sank in, Marcus emerged from his bedroom, drawn by the raised voices. Far from showing remorse, he immediately went on the offensive. If you had just given us more to invest at the beginning, we would have hit the threshold for the premium returns, he accused. This is what happens when you do things halfway. I stared at him in disbelief. You lost $30,000 of my money on a scam, and you're blaming me for not giving you more. It wasn't a scam, he shouted. You just don't understand cryptocurrency. If you had listened to me years ago, when I first talked about Bitcoin, we would all be millionaires by now. My parents, rather than holding Marcus accountable, began making excuses for him. He really believed in this, Mom said. He was only trying to help the family. We thought we could solve all our problems, Dad added. Pay off the house, fix the roof, maybe even pay you back someday. The most devastating part was what came next. Instead of apologizing profusely or showing any real understanding of the magnitude of their betrayal, my parents immediately pivoted to expecting me to fix the situation again. We know you must be upset, Mom said, reaching for my hand, which I pulled away. But we need to figure out what to do now. The bank says we need to pay $12,000 to stop the foreclosure. And where exactly do you think that money will come from? I asked, my voice eerily calm, despite the storm raging inside me. Well, Dad said hesitantly, you just got that bonus you mentioned. The bonus, $15,000 for bringing in a major new client. The first significant windfall of my career. I had finally, after 5 years of supporting them, planned something for myself, a down payment on a small condo. I had excitedly shared this news with them just 2 weeks earlier. Marcus jumped in. It's not like you need a fancy condo anyway. You're barely home with how much you work. That was the moment I finally saw with perfect clarity what I had been blind to for years. I wasn't helping my family. I was enabling a toxic dynamic that was destroying all of us. My parents would never learn financial responsibility if I kept bailing them out. Marcus would never grow up if he faced no consequences. And I would eventually break under the financial and emotional strain. Without another word, I walked out of that house, got into my car, and sat there for nearly 20 minutes, my hands shaking too badly to drive. Finally, I called Sarah and broke down completely, sobbing as I explained what had happened. She listened, offered calm support, and then said the words I needed to hear. Come home to me. We'll figure this out together. The week following that foreclosure revelation remains a blur. I called in sick to work for the first time in my career, unable to focus. Sarah stayed with me, managing practical matters, fielding the constant calls and texts from my parents that I couldn't bring myself to answer. Their messages ranged from tearful apologies to subtle guilt trips. We understand if you need time, followed immediately by, the bank called again about the foreclosure. Or we respect your feelings, paired with, Dad is having chest pains from the stress. Marcus, predictably, vacillated between defensive accusations that I was abandoning the family and half-hearted apologies that always included justifications. Sarah suggested I talk to a professional, gently, researching therapists until I agreed. Dr. Winters listened without judgment, then asked a question that stopped me cold. What? Would you tell a friend who was in your situation? The answer came immediately. I would tell them they were being taken advantage of and needed to stop. Saying those words aloud felt both liberating and terrifying. Over several sessions, Dr. Winters helped me understand the codependent dynamics at play. I learned about enabling behaviors, how my constant rescuing prevented my family from experiencing natural consequences. We explored why I'd fallen into the role of family savior, partly from genuine love, but also from deeply ingrained childhood patterns where my worth was tied to being the responsible one. Your parents trained you to be the solution to their problems, Dr. Winters explained, and they trained Marcus to expect others to solve his. Neither of these roles is healthy for any of you. During this period of reflection, I forced myself to calculate exactly how much money I had given my family over 5 years. The total shocked even me. Over $150,000. That didn't include countless smaller expenses I'd covered, groceries, broken appliances, birthday gifts far beyond my budget. It represented years of overtime, sacrificed vacations, delayed financial goals, and a substantial portion of my retirement savings that I had withdrawn early, incurring penalties. What made this revelation even more painful was realizing how little had changed despite this enormous investment. My parents were no closer to financial stability. If anything, they'd become more dependent. Marcus had regressed further into entitlement. With Sarah's encouragement, I sought professional financial advice. The advisor explained the house could still be saved with the $12,000 payment, but also outlined alternatives, selling the house, reverse mortgage, or even bankruptcy. The important thing to understand, he said, kindly, but firmly, is that none of these options actually requires your money. These are choices and consequences your parents can navigate themselves. I also consulted a lawyer, worried about legal obligations. He assured me adult children have no legal responsibility to support their parents financially unless specific agreements are signed, which I hadn't. Your moral and emotional obligations are between you and your conscience, he advised. But legally, this is not your burden to bear. Both professionals strongly recommended that I stop enabling. In quiet moments alone, I began journaling. I wrote about childhood memories that now appeared in a different light. Dad praising me for giving Marcus my dessert, Mom expecting me to let him win games, teachers commenting on my maturity, not recognizing it was hypervigilance, and an unhealthy sense of responsibility. I reflected on how these patterns had followed me into adulthood. My friend's circle had shrunk. Romantic relationships before Sarah had ended. Career opportunities declined because my family needs me here. My identity had become so entangled with being the family rescuer that I hardly knew who I was without that role. Sarah became my anchor. Unlike Jessica, who had grown frustrated, Sarah understood I needed to reach my own conclusions at my own pace. She shared stories from her own family, not perfect, but fundamentally healthy, showing me what balanced relationships looked like. My parents would never take money from me if it meant I couldn't pursue my own dreams, she explained. They'd live in a studio apartment before asking me to sacrifice my future for their comfort. I also reconnected with old friends who had witnessed my family dynamics and tried to warn me in ways I hadn't been ready to hear. We all saw it, my college roommate Ryan told me, but you weren't ready to see it yourself. The most profound realization came during a therapy session when Dr. Winters asked me to consider whether my help had actually improved anyone's life, including my own. Your parents never developed financial literacy because they didn't have to, she pointed out. Marcus never developed work ethic because there were no consequences. And you never developed the ability to prioritize your own well-being because you were too busy managing theirs. It was a devastating truth. My help had actually prevented growth and change. By constantly intervening, I had unwittingly contributed to a system that was hurting everyone. Real help, I was beginning to understand, sometimes meant stepping back and allowing natural consequences to occur. Armed with newfound clarity and the unwavering support of Sarah and Dr. Winters, I began preparing for what I knew would be an extremely difficult conversation. This wasn't a decision made lightly or in anger. It came after weeks of careful consideration, professional consultation, and deep personal reflection. Dr. Winters helped me develop a plan, emphasizing clarity, compassion, and consistency. Your family will likely respond with tactics that have worked in the past: guilt, anger, promises of change, she warned. You need to be prepared for that emotional storm without getting swept away by it. I worked with my financial advisor to create information packets about resources available to my parents: government assistance, credit, counseling, debt management, affordable housing. I researched job placement services for Marcus. Sarah helped me prepare emotionally, role-playing potential scenarios so I could practice maintaining boundaries. Remember, she'd remind me, setting boundaries is not punishment. It is an act of love for them and for yourself. I wrote out what I wanted to say, revised it dozens of times, and practiced until I could deliver it calmly, even when my heart was racing. I scheduled the conversation at a neutral location, a quiet coffee shop with private seating. On a Saturday morning, I arrived early, securing a corner table, ordering herbal tea to calm my nerves. I had asked to meet with just my parents, wanting to address the core relationship first. But I wasn't entirely surprised when they arrived with Marcus in tow. His presence changed the dynamic immediately. Instead of appearing contrite, my parents seemed bolstered by his support, sitting across from me with expressions ranging from defensive to expectant. After brief, awkward greetings, I took a deep breath and began the speech I had prepared. I love you all very much. I started, maintaining eye contact despite my anxiety. And because I love you, I need to be honest about something that has been damaging our family for years. The financial arrangement we have had, where I support all of us, is not sustainable or healthy for anyone involved. I outlined the facts without accusation. 5 years of support, over $150,000, culminating in the diversion of mortgage payments that led to the foreclosure. Notice, I acknowledged my role in enabling this dynamic and expressed regret for not setting boundaries sooner. Going forward, I continued, my voice steady despite the tension crackling. Across the table, I will no longer be providing financial support. This includes the mortgage, utilities, car payments, or any other expenses. I am not doing this to punish anyone, but because continuing this pattern hurts all of us in different ways. I slid the folder of resources across the table. These are programs and services that can help with your financial situation, housing options, and employment opportunities. I am happy to help you navigate these resources, but I will not be providing money. The silence that followed lasted only seconds, but felt eternal. Then, predictably, Marcus was the first to react. This is how you treat family. He exploded, loud enough that nearby patrons turned to look. After everything Mom and Dad have done for you, they gave you everything, and this is how you repay them. Mom began to cry quietly. Dad stared at the resource folder, jaw clenched. We never meant to take advantage, Mom said between sniffles. We just didn't know what else to do. I understand that, I replied, working to maintain composure. And I am not angry or blaming you. But continuing as we have been will not solve the underlying problems. Marcus scoffed. Easy for you to say from your privileged position. Not everyone can. Just get high-paying jobs like you. This is not about my job or your lack of one, I countered, refusing to be derailed. This is about creating a situation where everyone takes responsibility for their own choices and lives. Dad finally spoke, his voice uncharacteristically small. What? About the foreclosure? Are you really going to let us lose our home? This was the question I had prepared for most carefully, knowing it would be their strongest. Emotional leverage. The foreclosure is a direct result of the decisions made to divert the mortgage money I was providing, I said gently but firmly. There are several options in that folder for addressing it, including selling the house before foreclosure completes, which would protect your credit rating and potentially provide funds for a smaller, more affordable place. So, that's it. Marcus's voice rose again. You're just abandoning us? What kind of son does that? I am not abandoning you, I insisted. I am offering to help in ways that do not involve money. I will help Mom update her resume. I will drive Dad to financial counseling appointments. I will help you look for job training programs, Marcus. But I cannot and will not continue to Fund a situation that keeps all of us stuck. The conversation deteriorated from there. Marcus stormed out after calling me several names I'd rather not repeat. Mom cried harder while Dad vacillated between anger and bargaining. Perhaps I could just help with the foreclosure payment, or maybe continue the mortgage for 6 more months. I held firm to my boundary, though it was one of the hardest things I had ever done. When it became clear that productive conversation was no longer possible, I stood to leave. I love you all, I said again. When you are ready to talk about solutions that do not involve my checkbook, I am here. Until then, I need some space to heal from everything that has happened. Mom reached for my hand. You cannot just cut us off completely, she pleaded. We are your family. I am not cutting you off, I clarified. I am changing the nature of our relationship to something healthier for everyone. I hope you can understand that someday. I walked out of that coffee shop with legs that felt like lead, but a heart that was beginning to feel lighter. In the parking lot, I called Sarah. It was awful, I admitted. But it is done. I'm proud of you, she said simply. Come home when you're ready. Home. The word had such a different meaning. Now, no longer my parents' house with its mortgage I paid, but the future I was finally allowing myself to build. My father called the next morning, his voice a mixture of desperation and calculation. Your mother has been crying all night, he began, before launching into a revised proposal. Perhaps I could just pay half the mortgage or loan them the reinstatement fee. We're not asking for ongoing support, he assured me. Just help with this one crisis. I took a deep breath and repeated my boundary. I cannot give you money, Dad, but I can help you explore other options if you are ready for that. He hung up without responding. It hurt terribly, but I also felt a strange sense of peace. For the first time in my adult life, I was choosing my own well-being, without guilt or apology. The 3 months following my decision were among the most difficult of my life. My parents drastically reduced contact, calling only when they had a new financial crisis they hoped would change my mind. Marcus sent occasional angry texts accusing me of destroying the family. I maintained my boundary while also leaving the door open for a different kind of relationship, responding to every message with some version of, I love you, and I'm here to talk or help in non-financial ways whenever you are ready. I learned about developments through Linda, my mother's cousin, who had always been sympathetic. She reported that after the initial shock, my parents had begun taking steps I had never imagined possible. They met with a housing counselor, who helped them list the house for sale before foreclosure was finalized. They opened negotiations with creditors. Most surprisingly, they told Marcus he needed to either contribute financially or find other living arrangements. Your dad has started looking into part-time work, Linda told me, and your mom is talking about taking a medical billing course. These changes, while painful, confirmed what the professionals had told me my family was capable of, more than they had demonstrated while I was absorbing all the consequences. Meanwhile, I focused on rebuilding my own life. With Sarah's encouragement, I resumed house hunting, eventually finding a modest but charming 2-bedroom condo within my budget. After years of paying someone else's mortgage, signing the papers for my own home was an emotional moment. Sarah helped me furnish it, creating a space that felt truly mine for the first time. My professional life improved as well. Without the constant drain of family emergencies, I had mental and emotional energy to invest in my career. I accepted a leadership role, mentored junior developers, and even began exploring starting my own consulting business. Most importantly, my relationship with Sarah deepened. 6 months after I purchased my condo, on a weekend trip to Michigan to visit her family, I proposed. Her enthusiastic yes, and the warm celebration with her parents and sister, showed me what family could and should be: supportive without being suffocating, loving without conditions or scorekeeping. The gradual reconnection with my own family began unexpectedly. My parents sold their house and purchased a small, affordable 2-bedroom condo in a senior-friendly community. The sale provided enough to clear their most pressing debts and make a modest down payment on their new place, with a mortgage payment less than half of their previous one. My mother called to share this news, her voice cautious but with an unfamiliar note of pride. We wanted you to know that we've found a solution, she said. We're not asking for anything. We just thought you should know. That conversation opened the door to tentative, periodic communications. I learned that Marcus, faced with the reality that my parents could no longer support him, had finally maintained a job for more than 3 months, working at a warehouse. He had moved into a shared apartment with coworkers and was, according to my mother, adjusting to responsibility. The first time I visited my parents' new home, 8 months after our confrontation, was both awkward and healing. Their condo was small, bright, and manageable. Mom had planted flowers on the small patio, just as she had at the old house. It's not what we expected at this stage of life, Dad admitted, but it's actually easier to maintain. Marcus wasn't present for that visit, which was probably for the best. Our reconciliation would take much longer, coming in smaller steps, civil text exchanges, brief phone calls, and eventually, nearly a year after the confrontation, a cautious lunch meeting where we talked primarily about neutral topics, but without the previous hostility. The most meaningful change was not in our external circumstances, but in the dynamics between us. Without money as the primary connection, we were slowly, awkwardly learning to relate as adults with separate lives who chose to maintain relationships rather than remained entangled by financial dependence. The following Thanksgiving, our first holiday together since the confrontation, was a turning point. We gathered at my condo with Sarah, coordinating the meal, everyone contributing dishes. There were moments of tension, particularly when Marcus made a pointed comment about my fancy new place, but also moments of genuine connection that had been absent for years. After dinner, my father pulled me aside. "I need to say something I should have said months ago," he began hesitantly. "You were right to do what you did. It was hard and I was angry for a long time, but it forced changes that needed to happen. Your mother and I are actually happier now living within our means." His acknowledgement brought tears to my eyes. It wasn't a complete accounting for years of exploitation, but it was a significant step toward healing. Today, 2 years after I stopped financial support, my relationship with my family has found a new equilibrium. It's not perfect. There are still occasional, smaller attempts to seek financial help, but they are much less frequent. Marcus still struggles with full independence, but he has maintained steady employment and no longer blames everyone else for his challenges. Sarah and I are now married and expecting our first child, a development that has further shifted family dynamics in positive ways. My parents are excited about becoming grandparents, and even Marcus seems to be maturing in the face of this family expansion. The most profound lesson I have learned through this journey is that true support is not always financial. Sometimes, the kindest thing we can do for those we love is to stop protecting them from the consequences of their choices. I now understand that my years of financial bailouts were not actually helping my family. They were postponing necessary growth and change. I've also learned about the importance of boundaries in all relationships. Love without boundaries is not really love at all. It is codependence that ultimately harms everyone involved. By reclaiming my financial autonomy, I was able to build a life aligned with my values while allowing my family members to develop capabilities they never knew they had. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, but it was also the most loving.